Okay, good morning, and welcome to the second installment in this three-part series on how to play better fingerstyle blues. And nice to see so many folks here. I'm just going to take a quick look through and make sure everything is working. I love getting the weather report from everybody. Hello, Glenn Wilkenfeld. Nice to see you. It is early in Berkeley. Nice to see all you folks here. Hey, Les, Stephen Malice, nice to see you. Too many people to shout out by name, but I really appreciate everybody showing up and looking forward to talking about improvisation this morning. Now, the thing is about working on any of this is that, nobody picks up the guitar to play exercises, right? And most of us don't have a ton of time at our disposal to work on this, and nobody wants to, you don't want to waste your valuable practice time looking for the right lessons to work on, or, learning the wrong things, or worst of all, like just, continuing to play what you already know. So what I want to do in this lesson and in this series as a whole is really show you what to work on and how to work on it so that you can play fingerstyle blues with more confidence and more creativity. So playing instrumental fingerstyle blues, I know some people also sing, and I know some people also play, other styles. But since that's what we're focusing on, there's something very specific about it. And when I was learning to play, it was the hardest thing was to find repertoire to work on. Like there'd be something here or something there or something kind of cool over there. But eventually I got so frustrated trying to pull together like enough tunes to, have like a body of work or a repertoire to play, that I just, had to learn how to transcribe stuff off of records so that if I heard something cool that I liked, I could learn enough of it to work on it. And the other thing was that what I really wanted to do was be able to play solo and still improvise. And there was nothing on how to do that. I mean, anything that was about fingerstyle blues was about note for note playing. Like, here's how to play this song the way Reverend Gary Davis did. But everything about blues, about soloing, was for single note electric blues playing, which I loved, but didn't really. I mean, it helped in sort of the grand scheme, but as far as how to do something solo, it was, didn't apply. And anything else tended to be way over my head. Like it would be Joe Pass chord melody style. Like that was the closest thing that jazz had to offer as far as playing solo. So again, for a lack of resources, I had to figure out for myself how to do what I wanted to do. And eventually, I was able to, from teaching it, I was able to sort of systematize it a little bit. And the other thing is that teaching forced me to figure out how to create my own stuff instead of just like transcribing it or learning it. Because anytime I wrote lessons for Acoustic Guitar Magazine or for TrueFire, they were like, well, it has to be public domain, or you have to make it up because we're not going to pay the rights. I mean, it's really expensive. Publishing rights just gobble up a huge amount of the budget that anybody making teaching material or instructional material has. So when I was doing that kind of thing, and then when I was writing music for television and creating these like libraries of music that a show could use, I would get the gig because I could write music and create and play blues guitar, but be like, okay, so make up 12 new blues tunes. You can't use Muddy Waters, you can't use Howlin' Wolf, you can't use whatever. So all those things made me try to figure out like a way to create fingerstyle instrumental blues music and how to improvise on it. So what I want to do in today's lesson is help you take the guesswork out of how to improvise on fingerstyle blues. And we're going to do that by going through a process of looking at a tune, looking at what's the chord progression, looking at what scales you might use, but more importantly than scales, we're going to look at phrasing. And this is really the heart of what we're going to do today, is there are 5 basic kinds of phrases that get used in the blues, that all the licks you hear go by, they're really just it's almost always like one of 5 kinds of phrases, one kind of rhythmic structure to it, right? There's just a way that people play. And if you can learn what that rhythmic structure is and what those typical kinds of phrases are, it makes using the scales and figuring out what to do with them over the chord progression so much easier. So we're going to do that. And then once we've created some phrases, we're going to use an approach that I call modular improvisation, where we're going to learn some specific solos and then learn how to break them apart and put them back together. So you have these little Lego blocks, like these little units you can assemble and reassemble in different ways, which gives you lots of possibilities. It's kind of like, it's like a midpoint between playing by rote, playing fixed things you've memorized, and being completely spontaneous. It's this place in the middle where actually a lot of improvisation lives, where you're taking elements of elements of playing and elements of licks and building blocks, and just learning how to reassemble them on the fly. That's what a lot of it is. And a lot of the improvising that you hear and love is actually done that way as well. So if you don't have the tab yet, go to the link below. If you're so if you want to participate in the chat, make sure you click out of. Make sure you're watching in YouTube. If you're not watching, if you're watching on my website instead, make sure make sure you've got access to the chat, and then go to the link below, right down here, and go download the tab. I've uploaded the tab booklet from Thursday, so that it's now got all the tab that goes with today's lesson. So all the phrasing and all the licks and the scale diagrams and all that are in there too. So that's like an update. Plus I corrected like a couple typos that were in the first one. And if you downloaded today's tab before around half an hour ago, I fixed a couple other things while I was prepping. So go get the tab. And if you haven't watched the first lesson on Groove, that's still posted on YouTube. That'll be up for a handful more days. So go check that out too. You don't have to have watched that to watch this, but we're going to jump right in and start talking about how to improvise. So, hello, John Farragher. Great to see you here. Some more folks joining just now. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep an eye on you guys so I know just if anything happens to the stream, just bellow, and hopefully I will see that. And now, let me get the tab ready to roll here, and we'll jump right in. I'm going to go for a while talking about this stuff. Please post your questions as I'm talking, as you think of them. But I'll take a big pause, along the way, to go through questions that you've got and answer them, as well as just sort of presenting these ideas. So, here we go. All right, so the first thing, like I said, we're going to go through basically 5 steps here. We're going to look at the form of the tune, which means the chord progression and the number of bars and what the shape of the tune is, what repeats and what doesn't. So look at the form of the tune, look at scale choices for playing over that form. That's number 2. Look at the 5 kinds of blues phrasing that you need. Look at some sample solos that I've written out, and we'll break down how that phrasing is being used to create those solos and how those solos take advantage of the form to sound musical. And then finally, we'll look at how to combine and recombine the examples in those solos so that you can have this kind of, limitless pile of things to, arrange and rearrange to create more and more solos, even before you start creating your own phrases, which of course would be great too. So right here we've got the form, and this is Nobody's Fault But Mine is an 8-bar blues. And so if you've gone through isolating the bass in the groove lesson, you know the chord progression because it's 3 bars of E minor, and then a bar of B7, and then the next line, E minor over to A7, C7 to B7 to E minor, right? So that's this right here. And now what we can do is sort of look at them, break this up into 2-bar blocks. And we can say, oh, look, so the first 2 bars, E minor, the next 2 bars, E minor to B7. Then we're back to E minor, and this is a bit of a variation on this. We go from E minor to A7, but it's similar. And then we have the turnaround, C7, B7 to E. So a few things about this. There are a lot of different ways you could think about this, but if you, looking strictly at the chords as opposed to the melody, we can basically call this an A-B-A-C form because these 2 sections are pretty similar. And starting here, we've got 2 bars of E. This is a real departure to go from E up to the B7. Then we're back to E, so that's kind of like a return to our opening phrase. And then this is definitely different from everything else because we start on the dominant chords and come back to home. So on this one, we're kind of sitting on 1. On this one, we're traveling from 1 up to 5, which sets up the need to return. Here, we're sitting on 1 again with a bit of a variation. And then here, we're starting on 5, which demands that we resolve back. But we get back before the end. We get back to 1. So just thinking of it in 2-bar blocks helps you to create some sort of structure for the tune and help you to remember it. So it's like, I got these 2 bars like this, then we change, then we come back to the beginning, then we go to a different ending. So we call that an A-B-A-C form, all happening within those 8 bars. So we're gonna take advantage of that, and especially the space in between these two bars, and between these 2 and these 2 bars, there's a bit of a gap. And then between these 2 bars and these 2 bars, there's a bit of a gap. And so we're gonna try to leave some breathing room the same way that the melody does, because the melody is what's really dictating a lot of this phrasing. So it's space, and then, so you notice at the end of every phrase, there's this place to take a breath. I mean, literally for the singer, but also creatively for the improviser. So always want to start with the form. That's the big picture. That's the container you've got to fill with your ideas. So now, I said we were going to talk about scales, but actually we're going to look at phrasing first. So these phrases all use just an E blues scale, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. But basically, phrasing and resolutions are terms I'm going to use kind of interchangeably. A phrase is just, more than 1 note, but less than a whole line or a whole song. And when we're looking at this, I'm going to also be referring to the first line and the second line of the tune or of the chord progression. So we've got A, B, A, C, we've got these 2-bar blocks, but we're also going to talk about playing what happens on the first line, and then which is the first 4 bars, and then what happens on the second line, which is bars 5, 6, 7, and 8. So just a heads up on that. Okay, So the idea of phrasing is, just like a verbal phrase, is more than a word, but less than a sentence, right? A phrase is not a complete idea. It sort of sets up an idea. Like if I say I'm going to ask you a question, that's a phrase. And then I give you the answer myself, that's another phrase. Those two phrases make this call and response, right? So a phrase is usually enough to start an idea or to answer an idea. And the thing about phrasing is that if you learn to improvise at all, like from playing like electric blues, say, there's a tendency to react to the chords. Like you hear the chord and you go, oh, I got to play something. Whereas the way most people actually play blues is to phrase in a way that resolves, to play licks that are going to land when they get somewhere. So you're thinking ahead a little bit. You're not hearing the chord and then reacting. You're thinking, how can I take everybody to the next downbeat, to the next one? So if you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, this first phrase is the simplest one we can have. It's called a short resolution. These are just terms that I have made up to describe what goes on. And so a short resolution, in this case, 3 notes, right? But the thing is, the way that it's phrased, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 is the important thing, that it leads into the downbeat. 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 1. Right? So once you have that phrasing and you have the blues scale, anything can go into that. Right? So we've got the blues scale, but now we've got some things to do with it that make it sound good. Now, obviously, you could spend more time getting to the downbeat. That would be number 2, the long resolution. So, all right? So we're starting on the and of 1. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And again, once you've got the basic scale, right? So any of these phrases, any of those notes drawn into that rhythm, I am tending to land on a root, right? So that's kind of like a little sub rule. You can land on another chord tone, but sometimes that doesn't sound as resolved, and sometimes that sounds like you're actually heading to another chord, which will become important at some point. Okay, now obviously, things don't always work out perfectly, so let's come up with a name for that. This is a delayed resolution. So you come into the downbeat, but you don't really finish until you're further along in the measure. But it has to fall over the bass like this, or it does fall over the bass like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Oh, sorry. So it still has a sense of resolution, right? It's just that instead of going, we're kind of fooling around when we get to the downbeat. It just takes us longer to get to the 1. So. And the thing is, short and long phrases make for a kind of call and response. You hear a short phrase, and then you hear something that echoes it, but in a more drawn out way. I'm actually phrasing this wrong. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So it draws it out. So it drags over into the place that you land. It doesn't resolve right on the one, it resolves later in the measure. So the resolution is delayed. So now there's also this idea of an echo resolution, which is the idea that you play something and then you play some kind of commentary on the resolution, right? Which also has its own kind of landing and resolving. And it could be chords or double stops. The idea is like, if this is the melody someone's singing, then the echo resolution is like what the guitar player, the pianist, harmonica player does in response. Right? And it does something with that empty space that doesn't just fill it up, it provides some kind of commentary, some kind of answer to the original thing. Now, it could also be like you play a longer lick. And those shorter licks that punctuate things are also a kind of echo resolution, because you finished your longer phrase. So that's another way to think of the echo resolution. It's just those little sort of tagging bits that come on afterwards to kind of say, I'm not quite done yet. And finally, number 5, the internal resolution. So sometimes things happen in the middle, like they happen within a measure, like right? So just on the beat, it resolves inside the measure. It doesn't start before the measure and come in. It doesn't start in the middle and drag out afterwards. It's self-contained. This happens too. So the internal resolution. Right, so like 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? So it can happen all within a measure. So the point is the way you phrase, right? The way you play, all of the things I played just now were all just done with not even, I mean, I might have played some flat fives in there, but basically the minor pentatonic scale that we all know and love. So let us go on and see what notes we're doing that to. Now, we're actually going to go through this whole lesson basically just using the E blues scale. But what I want to show you is how the meaning of those notes can change based on what the root of the chord is at the moment. All improvisation really comes down to this idea of notes over chords. There's chords going on and there's notes happening on top. And the chords you can't do anything about. That's the fixed reality of the landscape that we're improvising within. But the notes on top, that's what you're improvising. That's what you're choosing. But the same note can mean something different depending on what the chord is. So like if you play an E here, it means the root. But if you play an E while everybody else or your thumb is playing an A, well, now it's the 5th. And if you play it over a B chord, now it's like a suspension. Same thing with this note. Flat 7 sounds great over the E. Now you play it over the A, again, it's a suspension. It sounds different. And if you put it over the B, it's the sharp 9. So one note can mean more than one thing. It can have more than one, it can have more than one relationship to the chord progression, just based on what chord you're on. So we're going to look at the blues scale and we're going to look at how those notes shift in meaning based on what chord you're on. And we're going to basically just use these notes as the blues scale. But it's good to know what's running in the background, which is the chord progression. So this first chord box is just the E blues scale. And the blues scale is nothing more than a minor pentatonic scale with a flat 5th added. And the way these are drawn out is the roots are dark, right? The root and the root. Any note that we're adding to the blues scale is this gray color, okay? And then all the notes that are just, black and white circles are the rest of the notes in the scale. And then underneath, I've written out in order what notes you have. Now, sometimes I put like the 9th or the 11th in the chord diagram, but here I left everything in order. So like a 9th and the 2nd are the same thing. So here you'll see flat 9 and 9, but down here I put flat 2 and 2, just to kind of cover both angles. In the context of playing chords and improvising, like you tend to think more in terms of ninths and upper notes like that. When you're just laying out the scale, it's clear just to see that it's the 2nd and the 3rd. So here we've got the basic scale: root, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, root, and then we can keep going up to the flat 3rd. So we play all that over an E root. And then here, we could also add in this note here, the 6th, which does not belong in the blues scale, but sounds good on blues. So we've kind of got an option of, we could either make more of a scale kind of sound, or we could have choosing the 6th instead of the 7th, choosing the 7th instead of the 6th. So it's an additional note that is an option, but it's good to know what it is relative to the root, that it's the 6th of E. Now, the reason that we want this note in the picture is if we just take the E blues scale and play it over A in the bass, right? Suddenly these notes mean something different, right? This note is now the 5th of A, and the flat 7 and the root, so that's cool, right? And then even this flat 9 sounds weird, but if you think of it as a note that connects up to the next note, that's good. And we've got some chord tones, right? We've got 5th and flat 7 and root, but we don't have a 3rd. So let's bring back this 6th of E and stick it over here. So here's the E blues scale over A. Okay, now that note that was the 6th on E, now it's the 3rd on A. That's what we like, because the major 3rd helps define a chord, helps tell you what the chord is. And now you can see we've got root and 3 and 5. So just by adding one note to the E blues scale, we can spell out an A chord, which is cool, because when you can spell out the sound of the chord using your single note line, that helps reinforce what's going on in the chord progression, and it makes it look like and sound like you know where you are, which you do. Now we can also add in this note, which is the 9th. It would be the 9th in the E scale, but it's the 6th of A. And we said that 6 sounds good on E. So why not use the 6th of A? So now we can play all kinds of things over A, which then we can come back to E or go on to B or wherever they're going to go. So the other two chords, and I'm doing this because of the chords that we have in the chord progression. We have E minor, we have A, we have C7 and B7. So I just want to look at, if I'm just going to use the blues scale, what's going to happen when I go through those different chords, right? So, hang on, just doing a little housekeeping here, make sure everything is still streaming. Good, yes, okay. So let's look at what happens to that E blues scale when we put it over C. So now we've got this same note that was the root of E is now the 3rd, and then we've got the 5th and the 6th and the flat 7. Again, just playing the E blues scale. Big gnarly major 7, and now let's add in a root that this note does not belong in the blues scale, but it's the root of C, so we might need it. And then continuing on with the blues scale, that note is now the 9th of C, and then we've got the 3rd on top, and then we're going to add in this note we added in that was the 6th of A is now the sharp 11 of C, which sounds weird, but leads to the 5th. So I'm sorry, that note doesn't belong. But anyway, you get the idea. So here we are. Those are all the notes of C, of A. Those are all the notes of E, the E blues scale over a C chord. And then here are all the notes of the E blues scale over B7. So we got the fourth, the flat sixth, the flat seven, we like that one. Major seven, not so great, but leading to the root. Sharp nine, like I said earlier, 4 and 5. So that's why, look, here, right here, this is kind of it right here. Root, sharp 9, which is the same thing as flat 3 and 5. This is why, that's why you hear people like Freddie King play that when they get to the 5 chord. Right? What they're doing is they're taking the blues scale and adding just enough notes and making just enough choices that it sounds like they're playing the chord changes, even though they're just playing the blues. I know I'm using all the air quotes this morning. But anyway, yeah, so here, like we can just pick out and focus on the notes we want to get things that will kind of help spell out what we're playing. And then coming into the A, you know, we can go cascading down, da-da-da-da-da, back to E. So, I mean, I've gone a little bit away from the minor blues that we're focusing on this morning to talk. I'm kind of talking about like the turnaround to a 12-bar blues in E, you know, with a major or dominant sound, right? But that's what we're looking at, and that's how people take the blues scale and manipulate it to target the chords that they're on or the chords that they're heading to. And so it doesn't just sound like, right? Because, you know, when you start to learn that scale and you kind of play it over the chord progressions, well, it doesn't really sound like I thought it was going to. This is a little disappointing. And, you know, part of it, what it is choosing which notes of the scale to use when, making a few judicious additions to the scale, which takes a little knowing, right? Like that's not obvious and intuitive, right? So that's kind of the landscape as far as scale choices. Now, let's get to the show. Here are, so now we've got our phrases, we've got our scale choices. Let's see how we can use those to actually play over the chord progression. So I wrote out 3 8-bar solos, and I'll play each one and break down what's going on with the phrasing. And then I'll talk about how we can scramble and rearrange all the elements. So here we go. And just, I make this caveat every time, but it's a lot easier to improvise than to actually sight read one's own written out improvisation. So I'll try to get these as close as possible so that when you're looking back at the tab afterwards, you know, they line up. But there may be, if you know, a pull off here, a rhythm there may be a little bit different when you're looking back later. But I'll do the best I can. So here we go. So 1, 2, 3. Play that a little quicker too. 1, 2. Yeah, so. And actually it should be like more of a straight 8s feel, right? Okay, so let's look at what's going on. It's mostly, you know, it's just the blues scale with these variations. But we open with a short phrase, a short resolution textbook, right? And 3 and, no, sorry, and 4 and 1. And then we have a little echo resolution here, a little additional commentary. And then we have this long resolution. And this is something, this is actually kind of, I didn't put this in the official taxonomy of the 5 phrases. But there's another thing that I think of as a compound resolution, where like 2 resolutions kind of chain together. One leads into the next. So here we've got a long resolution. I mean, it really lands there. Like that lick lands on the root of B. So, but as we land on this B, we kind of drag it over into a delayed resolution onto the B7. So I think of that as, those two, that's a long resolution clearly leading into the B chord, but then it's a delayed resolution once you land on the B. So that's compound resolution, putting those two things together. Then here we have an internal resolution. Right? And then here we have a delayed resolution, like it's a short pickup, and then we play into this bar, and then a long resolution back to the 1. And then an echo resolution at the end. So notice that this is really just blues stuff, right? Root, added in the second, down to the root, flat 7, 5, flat 7, root. Looked at just as a scale itself. But we're playing it over a C, so there's your sharp 11 if you want to think about that. But it's just, if you just play this without the bass, just blues. There's that 6th of the E blues scale, and then so it's the chord, it's the fact that this is happening in the context of the chords that makes it what it is. But also notice the breathing space. I said we were going to talk about the space between A and B and between A and C. And notice there's a great big pause here. And there's a smaller but considerable pause here. And so if you just listen to it in terms of that. And there's a sense of call and response. Then we got a short phrase with an echo, and then it's answered by this longer phrase. So this sets it up. Okay, then what happens? Oh, this happens. And then again, 2 shorter phrases. Internal phrase answered by this delayed resolution. And then long resolution. So there's a kind of symmetry. Shorter phrases answered by a longer phrase, shorter phrases answered by a longer phrase, big pauses in between. So that makes for a kind of structure that you can use in your own soloing. Here's the second solo. So I'll just play through it first. Again, I'll play it a little slower. So, same kinds of phrases, same blues scale, different way of laying things out. We open with a long resolution. And you can think of this as where we land. And then it's being answered by this short little. And then we got another long one, which is pretty much the same phrase. But then it's chained together into this delayed resolution. So that's another way of thinking about things, which is to have a phrase that gets answered one way, which works over the E chord, and then just take the same phrase and repeat it, and then answer it a different way over the 5 chord. And that creates a kind of unity and sort of cohesion to what you're doing too. Now we got another long resolution. And again, you can think of this as resolving onto the A. That's your long resolution. Right? That's really where it lands, but it holds over. So there's another one of those compound resolutions. And then finally, a longer phrase that takes you back to the 1, and then a new echo resolution that just stays on the 1. So again, this introduces this idea of creating call and response by playing a phrase and answering it one way, creating a phrase, no, repeating the phrase and answering it differently. And then here you're kind of echoing what's going on structurally here. You got a long phrase with a delayed resolution and then another long one. So this is all built almost entirely out of long resolutions, right? So it's longer phrases, but they still have some kind of, structure and cohesion to them. Okay, so here's the third solo, and I'll play through this one too. So to break this one down, this one also is built out of a bunch of longer phrases. This one starts after the downbeat, and it's actually going to resolve to this E right here. So, and then echo resolution, and then internal phrase, which then carries over all the way to here. And then this is the pickup into this long phrase. And here I'm going to keep the bass line from the embellished arrangement and play over that. And that's all just pentatonic. Short phrase. Short phrase. Echo resolution with the B7 sharp 9. So again, look for the spaces. There's a sense of division between these two sections, and then again between these two. So and then and that longer phrase comes at kind of a climactic point, right? It's like the arc of this is to build up, and then this is the peak right here, and then this is kind of trailing you back out. You can see just as far as where the highest notes are, that's kind of the peak. Plus the combination of hitting the highest note and then playing the busiest, plus changing up the bass line is more dramatic too. Okay, so that is the essence of what's going on. But the other piece of it is the modular piece. So as usual, it has taken me far longer than I thought to explain all these things. So I want to stop here and take a few questions. And then I'll go over a bit about how to combine and recombine the lines. But I want to stop here, and I see some comments, and I just want to take a moment and read through them. Lots of folks here, which is lovely. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure if these are questions or comments. Oh, hello, Joel Smith. Oh, from Mac. It's the brushes, the touch, etc. that makes the simple stuff so nice. That's where I struggle. That's a good thing to talk about, actually. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to that today, but that might be something to talk about in the very near future. Yes, from Stephen Malice. Trying to make simple notes sound good is definitely a good way to go. Let's see. Okay, no real questions. So let me just go ahead and talk about this. Appreciate the nice comments. I'm glad that this is, I'm glad if light bulbs are going off for anybody. I basically aspire to be in the light bulb business. So if that's happening, that's good. I'm glad it's making some sense. Okay, so this is stuff that you can just sort of go over. There's no new material here. It's sort of what you do with it. So once you have these 3 sample solos, right? Obviously, the idea is to look at the solos and how they're put together and use them as models for your own, coming up with your own phrases, your own licks. But a lot of playing blues is acquiring a vocabulary. And if you learn to play electric blues, like, your playing's like scattered with like, oh, this is an Albert King thing I learned, and this is a B.B. King thing I learned, and oh, I got this from that Allman Brothers thing that Dwayne Allman does. It's like it's all like putting together spare parts into your own material. So there's nothing wrong with taking individual phrases and assembling them. So here I've just taken here's solo number 1, line 1, and I've just kind of run it into solo number 2, line 2. So then now we've got a new solo basically. So now we've got. So if you had those first couple of solos worked out, then you could start to, I mentioned there's line 1 and line 2. You can just split the solos at the line at the end of, bar 4 and switch to a different solo. And now you've got, a different way to do things. Similarly, you could start with solo number 3, line 1, and end it with solo number 1, line 2, like this. So. So how cool is that? Now here's solo number 2, line 1, going into solo number 3, line 2. And so you can, I think there were some questions about this from Glenn. My struggle is that I can learn all the different versions. The difficulty is getting myself to be resourceful enough to drop them in a spontaneous way when I'm playing. And you just kind of answered my question. Okay, good. Yeah, this is the middle step in doing that, right? So now here's where the rubber meets the road. Here's the last bit, which is if you can break out the phrases within a line, right? So you've got line 1, here's solo 1, line 1, solo 2, line 1, solo 3, line 1. Here's that gap in the middle that I've been talking about. We can just split right here and play this, the beginning of line 1, of solo 1, line 1. And then go here. Right? So now we've got, this is something we haven't had yet, right? Like you can learn those 3 solos, but now we're just taking like, oh, here's the call phrase from line 1 and the answer phrase from a different version of line 1. And we can do the same thing, going from here to here, like this. then now the thing is, yeah, you're working from written out stuff, but the more you do this, the more you break it down into moments like, oh, this is what works over the one. Oh, this is what works when we're going to the four chord. Oh, this is what works when we're coming back to the one, you know? So you've got 3 ways to set up the one chord, right? So you could go through like this, like this, like this, and go, okay, what are my 3 ways to start? Or, right? So you got 3 ways to start. Now you got 3 different ways to answer it. So if you could start on this one and go here and here, you could start on this one and go here or here. You could start on this one and go here or here. It's just math. There's just combinations, you know? So, you know, you could do this a bunch of different ways. The same thing for line 2, right? So here's line 2, and here's the solo number 2 to start with. Now we could go here instead. Right? Grab solo number 3, the back half of it. So we get this. Or we could go from here to the back half of line 2. So right? So thank you, Stephen Malice. Yes, 81 combinations, because Guido's not here today to do the combinations for me. So I'm glad you're picking up the slack, right? So a lot of different things. So yeah, if there's that many combinations, like on one level, I want to say, like, who cares if you're improvising, right? You're recombining stuff. You know, you have all these different possibilities. And the more you do it, the more it will get into your ears and into your hands. And eventually there will come a day when you're sitting there doing it and you realize, I'm not thinking about this anymore. I can just play, right? And that will happen if you just go through all the possibilities over and over and over again. So that's what I came to talk about. So go download the PDF, go back and check out the groove lesson as well, and come back on next Tuesday when we'll talk about arranging and how to put all of this together into a complete arrangement and a complete tune. So again, like, you know, the whole idea is to, you know, you don't want to, I want to give you like a linear, like a practice, like a way to work on improvisation, because there's nothing worse than, you know, wanting to get better at something and, like, you know, not knowing what to work on, you know, not being able to, or like just going down that rabbit hole, right? Of like, oh, I want to get good at this thing, so let me go look and see what's out there. And then before you know it, like 4 hours have gone by on the internet, right? So, you know, this is a way, like having this kind of structure, you can apply this to other tunes, 12-bar blues, 8-bar blues, major, minor, right? And so, you know, hopefully this will help you avoid like wasting your practice time and, you know, on things that, you know, aren't what you want to know how to do. And so this way, hopefully, you know what to work on, you know how to work on it, so you can make the kind of progress that you want to make. Really, I think that playing fingerstyle guitar is so cool and can be really creative, and I just want you to be able to play it with confidence and with conviction, so it feels really great when you do it. So again, thanks for being here. Come back Tuesday for part 3. Make sure you go grab the PDF, and I'll play a little more just on the way out. Thanks for being here, and hope you have a lovely weekend. Thanks for being here. I'll see you Tuesday.